And the thing what I did, though, I tasted every fruit, every vegetable, because I had a lot to catch up on. I never had a strawberry or apple until I was like 17, 18 years old.
Incredible.
So I didn't really understand American flavor profiles.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Tavel Bristol-Joseph is a pastry chef and partner at Emmer & Rye, Hestia, Canje, and many other acclaimed restaurants in Austin, Texas, and beyond. He's also opened an incredibly cool dessert tasting restaurant, Nicosi, in San Antonio. On this episode, we talk about Tavel's early cooking life in New York and how he grew a cheesecake mini empire out of his Brooklyn apartment. We also talk about his move down to Texas and how his unique skills with pastry and restaurant hospitality has made him one of our country's most important chefs. I really enjoyed getting to hear Tavel's story, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Thank you for joining This Is Taste. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm really excited to see you. I loved my one meal in Austin.
Yeah.
What you're doing at Kanji is remarkable, and I had this in September 2023. I got to travel all around Texas, and your meal was a real highlight.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I heard your podcast and I heard you saying that it was amazing.
Okay.
So I was listening. Listening. I heard you on the show and you said that it was one of your favorite meals.
I wasn't just saying it, right?
Yeah,
I got the receipts. The receipts are there. Okay. Well, before we get into your incredible story and how you ended up in Austin, some of the time you spent living in New York and moving to New York as a teenager. You know, you're in New York today. Where do you want to dine out? You're doing a special dinner tonight, but outside of the time when you're working, where do you want to dine out?
Man, first of all, New York is one of my favorite food cities. Every time I come here, there's always like something new that open and exciting. But I got some favorites. I got that I want to check out before. So second, I'm gonna eat at the James Beard House tomorrow night.
Oh, cool.
So that's gonna be a lot of fun. But restaurants like Damaka, like that's one of the staple stops for me.
Yeah.
Fish Cheeks. Yeah. Gotta check that out at some point. Four Horsemen in Brooklyn. Really fun, good food. And then Trin City for my Caribbean people. I got to make sure that I get some roti or something like that. So normally when I go see my mom's that lives in Brooklyn, that's when I'll go and we'll get some Trin City, just hit the cab and get to Queens real quick.
Get to Queens up there. Yeah. So your mom's still here, so you're spending a little bit of time in New York.
Oh, yeah. I try to spend some time. She comes out to see me, and then I come and do spot checks throughout the year.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Yeah.
You're a chef. You gotta see what other folks are doing.
Exactly.
When you look at a restaurant's pastry menu, and of course you're running restaurants full stop, but you're a pastry chef by training, and that's really a part of your focus. What do you look at?
Yeah. Man, I'm looking. The interesting thing for me is I look at how the menu flows with the savory menu, because I think that to me says a lot about the thoughtfulness of a pastry chef, is being able to look at the savory side and complement it, and not just showing out all the tricks you have, but letting it make sense. And then I also look for flavors too. Like, what are the diversity in flavors? Like, is these four dishes have the same line, or am I going to be taken on this journey? Like, what is the story we're telling with this menu? Those are the things I look at before I even try anything.
Yeah, you can spot the menu right away, and you can see, is it they're just doing some American classics like, cheesecake and cookies, or, shoehorned into like a Thai menu.
Right.
Which happens sometimes,
yes.
and fine with that.
Yeah, all that is good too.
You can say, but maybe it's not an afterthought, right? Dessert should never be an afterthought.
Right. Never be an afterthought, because I truly believe that is the impression that everyone walks out the door. That's the lasting impression.
So, Tavel, you moved from Guyana to New York City when you were 17.
Yeah.
And, in terms of ending up in New York, having this city of all these foods, and of course, you were very interested in food at 17. What was it like to integrate into New York City food culture?
Yeah, well, good question. Honestly, it's the interesting thing is that when I moved here, I was so like it was just a culture shock. And I still had the passion for food, but that wasn't my priority. My priority was like I was 17. I was now starting to think about who I am as an individual. I was meeting new family members. I was trying to understand a culture here that was completely different from mine. Food was like the third on the list, to
Yeah.
be honest with you. It was one of those things where, mom cooked every day at the house. And every Sunday, she would have me and my brother, we would have every other Sunday, we would alternate, and we would cook for the family because we grew up in like a family house. So every floor is a different family member. And it was one of those things where we would cook and we were waiting to see who's going to win and how the family respond to it.
Yeah.
So that was my little competition at the house while going to culinary school. But it was really, honestly, it was just like, it was a lot. That whole period, I feel like, of my life from the ages of 17 to about 20, 21, it's like a little blurry because I'm just like, oh, what is this? What is that? Because think about this kid that's coming from South America that you're walking into a grocery store and there's like 20 different toothpaste options.
Yeah.
I came from where there's only one.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, this is,
Yeah.
and then you go to the next aisle and then the soaps. And then you go to the next, and I was like, I didn't even know I've never even been in a space like that. So just learning that alone. And the thing what I did though, I tasted every fruit, every vegetable, because I had a lot to catch up on. I never had a strawberry or apple until I was like 17, 18 years old.
Incredible.
So I didn't really understand American flavor profiles. And I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm going to bring Guyana culture to, I was not thinking that. I'm like, I'm here. I'm going to make the best of this. So I need to find out everything about this land that I possibly can. So going through the grocery store, I would be the kid that would be picking off a grape and tasting it. I taste every single grape. I taste vegetables, raw, everything, because I just wanted to kind of like start to curate this palate that I understood what the food tastes like.
So when did food become a professional pursuit? It sounds like you had a really deep understanding of food back home and you were interested in it, and scholastically you were interested in it, but there's got to be that 17 to 20 period when you're like, man, I want to actually be a chef.
Yeah. I believe that time really came when I was probably around like 21, I would say, is when that decision made. Because, it's all the pressures when you're 21, right? Everybody's like, oh, you're grown now.
Yeah.
Now you got to make your grown man decision.
Yeah, you're like booted out of the house, perhaps. Yeah.
So it was one of those things. It was like, okay, cool. Then if that's the case and that's the expectation, I need to start to think about what I truly want to do, because being a chef, what at first was just, I'm good at this thing. I'm going to see where it goes. I'm going to continue to work and go to school and just kind of following the pattern. And then I think at 21, I'm in the River Cafe. I was working there at the time. And just looking at the demeanor and how the chef carried himself and the responsibility he had in the kitchen, and how masterfully he was like orchestrating, like from prep to service, and how things and the respect that he had, I was like, that's what I want to be. I don't always want to be, in the position of just cooking. I want to be able to curate an experience.
Yeah.
So that's when I started to get serious.
So let's remind everyone, River Cafe in Brooklyn was a restaurant of great importance and really doing, I would say, structured cuisine, on the pastry side, a real, a menu of, what the cuisine was
American,
right? Like American. but really one of the main Brooklyn, I would say, fancier upscale restaurants.
Yeah.
And what kind of jobs were you doing at, and how did you end up
Yeah.
at River Cafe? Like, what's that story about?
Yeah. Yeah, the River Cafe still is one of the staples, right, and most respected spaces in Brooklyn. Um, I so I was in culinary school, and a friend of mine, was working at the River Cafe as a pastry cook. While I'm in school, he's like, it was coming up time for do my externship. And I was like, well, I need to pick a space. I had no understanding or the significance of how important that restaurant was from the outside. Because again, I'm still learning
Yeah.
stuff. And I went in to do an interview with the pastry chef to ask her to do my internship. In the conversation, she's mentioning like, oh yeah, like, we would love to have you on the team. When can you start? And in my mind, I'm thinking, I wasn't planning on a job interview. I was just coming to I was actually coming to work for free. But how she was talking, it was almost like she was offering me a job. So I was like, let me just play along with this.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I can start whenever you want me to start. She's like, okay, great. This is how much you'll make an hour, and this is when you can start. I said, fantastic. I walked out of there with a job.
Amazing.
But I still had to have the internship conversation.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can't go back tomorrow, the first day, and say it. So I waited about a week while I was there. And then when I went in, I said, hey, chef, as I mentioned, I'm still in school. Can I do my internship here? And she was like, absolutely. Just sign in the hours. I'll sign the paper.
That's such an ideal situation.
It was perfect.
Because like this idea of the free labor after school that you're paying for is never really tracked with me as a good business decision.
Right.
But
right.
you
100%.
you did that. Well, I want to talk about something you told me when I was dining at your restaurant, and it really sticks with me. You ended up doing some pop-ups out of the family house that you referred to.
Yeah.
And you told me this story about using the entire apartment building.
Yeah.
So what was this pop-up and what were you doing? And tell me about this.
Right. So after working at the River Cafe, I worked there for 5 years. And then, so while I was there, I think my last year of working there, I was like, man, I want to do something else because I had the schedule that I wanted. I was working nights. I was in a routine. All right, because after a couple amount of years of working in the space, you kind of get into a flow where you understand everything about the space. So I was like, I need something else to challenge me. And the first dessert I've ever made was a cheesecake. And I fell in love with cheesecake from that point on, New York style cheesecake. And I had this like just drive to continue to make as many different flavors as I possibly can and try these things. So I started this business where I was doing cheesecakes for Thanksgiving, Christmas, any birthdays. And it was just people that I knew. And I went to Vistaprint and I made all these business cards.
Oh, right.
And I would just give it out to like everyone that works with me and stuff and tell them, yeah, ask your friends, whoever got a birthday, whatever I can. So I started that and I would bake these cheesecakes out of the house. And as I mentioned before, we have this family house. So it's 4 floors, 4 ovens. I would go to work service, get out of work around 12, 1 o'clock. Then I would head home and start making my cheesecake batter. Then I would bake cheesecakes probably until about 4 in the morning. Wow. And then I would decorate whichever ones I need, throw stuff in the oven, decorate whichever ones. And at that time, everyone is sleeping in the house. So I'm able to go in everyone's kitchen, turn their ovens on. So I was probably putting out about 50 cheesecakes a night.
That's amazing.
It got to a point where it was almost too much.
Did you have like a speed rack somewhere to like
no,
hold them all?
I used everyone's dining table. So I was like, take cakes out, put it on the dining table, and then put it in the fridge, cool stuff down, like just moving things around. And honestly, every holiday I was busy, but I always kept my job and I never shortcut on that. It was one of those things where I'm like, I have to do both. And I'm not compromising either. So if it means I got to stay up all night to finish these cakes, then that's what's going to happen. Because I didn't have to go to work until 3 the next morning. So I can stay up until 6 and then go to sleep. And then when I get to the job, I would text anyone that I had their cheesecakes, and it would be in my trunk, and I would open up. I had like a little, I had a Eddie Bauer Ford Explorer.
Oh yeah.
So I would fold the whole back with cheesecake, and you got your name on it. I'll pop the trunk from the restaurant. Look, you take your cake out, close it back, and unlock my car.
It's such a great model. I love. It's such a good story too. I mean, it's very smart. I mean, and having 4 ovens is like remarkable.
Yeah.
What, Tavel? Tell me, what's your style of cheesecake? Because I'm really curious when you said you were playing around with different flavors and what, like, you're such a skilled pastry chef. I mean, I cannot imagine what you were doing.
I was doing New York style, and I probably, after the last time I checked, I went up to like 150 different flavors that I did. I'm talking about every Girl Scout cookie flavor. We're talking about, the rum raisins, the candy cane, you name it, ginger, everything. I made all those flavors. But right now, I'm in love with like Bass cheesecake. That's my jam right now. It like a good Bass cheesecake transform you into a different space just with the level of flavors and depth and flavors that you can get.
And that's like, for some, you call it a burnt cheesecake because it has a burnished kind of crown to it.
Yeah.
And like, what's the difference of the cheese in it too? Is there a slight difference in texture?
Yeah. So the same cheese, same cream cheese, but because the Basque is baked at a high temperature and it has whole eggs in it, it is a lighter, more airier, more fluffy cheesecake instead of the New York cheesecake that's more dense, more creamy, which both I'm a fan of depending on the day. But with the Basque, I think because it's burnt, there's this beautiful marriage with bitter and caramel and vanilla that you smell it. It tastes exactly how it smells. And that's special.
Yeah, really special cheesecake. So it sounds...
I'm Nomi Fry.
I'm Vincent Cunningham.
I'm Alex Schwartz, and we are Critics at Large, a podcast from The New Yorker. Guys, what do we do on the show every week?
We look into the startling maw of our culture and try to figure something out.
That's right. We take something that's going on in the culture now. Maybe it's a movie, maybe it's a book, maybe it's just kind of a trend.
And we expand it across culture as kind of a pattern or a template.
Join us on Critics at Large from The New Yorker. New episodes drop every Thursday. Follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Sounds like you could have like opened up a cheesecake business. You could have ended up living in New York and staying here and worked in many restaurants. But you don't. You end up in Austin, Texas, and I want to get that story down, how you end up down in Austin. Emmer and Rye, you open to great acclaim. There must have been a real moment where rubber hits the road and you're like, do I really want to move out of my hometown to Austin? Yeah. Or perhaps it was an easier answer.
Yeah. Well, so 2 things happened. I moved to Arizona first.
Oh, okay.
So I left New York and I went to Arizona. I lived in Arizona for about 5 years.
Oh, so there's a transition period.
Yeah. So I made because I was I wanted to see other things. I wanted to explore. I was in a relationship at the time, so it was like, okay, I'm gonna just see where this goes, and wherever you go, I'll go and figure it out. So I went to Arizona, lived there for 5 years, and that's where I met my business partner, Kevin. We both worked for the same company. And we worked after we were working for a while, and he was like, hey, like, I think that we could create something and do something really special. I have this idea. So he pitched the idea to me and he said, I'm looking for a business partner. And I'm like, great, let's do it. I'd never been to Texas before, never been to Austin before, but as a friend. You say yes, and then you say, how are we going to get it done, right? So I was like, great, let's try it out. And because we had this passion where we wanted to change the food system, we wanted to change the way we operate within the food system, and we wanted to change the way people view the food system. Everything was coming out of a box, and no offense to Cisco or anyone, but that is not how you should eat every day. And we understood the importance of sustainability. We understood the importance of how do we, not sustainability only in the word, in the terms of food, but in the terms of human in life. And how do we sustain a farm? How do we sustain our bodies? How do we sustain the economy? How do we sustain a business? We wanted to explore that as much as possible. And that's why we opened up Emmer and Rye in Austin.
Yeah, so you were in Arizona. I would imagine, was it more of a corporate role? Were you doing like
Yes.
because there's lots of like golf clubs and things
Right,
like that.
right. It was I was a corporate pastry chef for the company.
That will break a guy. Like
Man,
you're a
it's a
creative
lot.
guy, and you really, I mean, you've shown it with your talents in Austin and other cities. But like, what's that like? Doing like the weddings, doing like the conferences.
It was it's different, right? I'm so happy I had that experience. I had a little bit of it because after I left the River Cafe here, I went to the W in Times Square. I was a pastry chef there for like 2 years. So I got a chance to see a little bit of that, and then moving to Tucson, Arizona, I was like, okay, cool. I understand volume now and the importance of that and how to organize and structure your day and how to prep. And so it gave me so much skill to be able to apply that. I just now doing all these restaurants and events and buyouts and stuff like that. It was really, honestly, it was one of those things where I knew that that's not what I wanted to do.
Right.
Yeah, it was like I'm confirmed. This is not what I
What's
want.
the stress like of doing like wedding cakes for like massive weddings and
Man, the crazy thing is that I did a wedding cake once, and it was like the couple was very hands-on what they wanted to do. And again, that was a thing where I thought it was fantastic, but it was a confirmation that this is not what I wanted.
right? Okay.
Because it was like, if I'm going to do a cake, I got to do a cake the way I want to do it, because there's so much time that you spend with this thing that if you're not connected to it, it's and you're just doing it for someone else, it just doesn't feel right.
So what's Austin like when you move there? I mean, what's the food scene like? And it's such a city that's developed.
Yeah,
Even in the past like 5 years, post-pandemic, it's developed. I mean, there's always exciting things happening in Austin.
Yeah.
But you're part of that narrative. But take us back to when you moved there and what it's like.
Yeah. So when we moved there, it was on the come up, I should say, right? So there was a few talents that was there.
What year are we talking?
This was 10 years ago. What's that?
Yeah, 2015. Yeah.
So it was like on the come up. And a lot of like new talent was coming into the space, and people were starting to see the bountifulness of Texas produce and the ranchers and what you can get out of the Gulf. Like it was so like I think it was when we came, it was like a bunch of young talent that was like coming out, right? And we knew that we had to kind of put our flag in the ground in this space, because we're coming from Arizona and New York, right? Yeah. And you're coming to make food and say, Texas, I'm making food that represents the community. And it's like, well, but you weren't born here, or you know what I mean? So you had to develop the relationships with all the farmers and ranchers. So when we went, our strategy was not necessarily like, hey, grow this for us and we're going to put this on the menu. Our strategy was, what do you grow really well here? Whatever it is, we will use that on our menu. And if something happens and you have to change, or we don't have enough, that's okay. We'll be able to switch. We're the professionals. We can change the menu tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Just do what you do best, and we will support that. And that was the beginning of building real, genuine relationships where, because most times chefs would go to these farmers and say, I'm going to buy all your tomatoes.
Yeah.
So you can grow them.
It's a volume game.
Yeah. And as most farmers, they're not rich people. So they're going to grow whatever you ask them to grow. But then the menu changes, or somebody says they don't like something and you wanted to take that tomato dish off the menu. That farmer now has a whole crop of tomatoes that they were growing just for you. Now they have to figure out a way to move it.
Yeah.
We didn't want to have that type of relationship.
What's the breakthrough like for Emmer and Rye? What puts you on the map? Like, what's the style of cuisine? I've not dined there, so I don't have firsthand experience, but it's been well regarded, and clearly you were doing something different because it is a competitive city. I mean, there's so much.
Absolutely.
Of course, you've got barbecue. That's such a tentpole there. You've got Tex-Mex. That's such a tentpole there. You're doing something slightly different, though.
Yeah. Well, for the record, Emmer and Rye just got a green star from Michelin.
Nice.
Which is an amazing accomplishment. And that's because of the work that we've been doing. What we wanted to do was really take things back to fresh mill grains when we talk about bread. So what Emmer and Rye does well, we do fresh pasta. We do fresh mill grain bread. So we're using Sonora and all these different grains that are really special. We do a lot of fermentation. Our fermentation program is, to me, it's one of the best that I've been around, where we don't bring in spices and things of that nature in the space. We would ferment, so like leeks, we would get a whole bunch of leeks in when they're in season, ferment that, make dehydrated leek powder, and now that is in a jar on the shelf. So when you're cooking, we're able to pull from all these things. I'm talking about, you name it, turnips, tomato, all those powders we would make, and we have them in jars. And then we would make, whether it's vinegar, kombucha, misos, all of our old bread scraps. We ferment that and make bread aminos, where you can put in ice cream or just in sauces that adds amazing umami flavors. So we're able to utilize all parts and the whole of the vegetables, fish, make gorams, all of that. So that was something. And then our beverage program too is really special. So when we talk about a restaurant that is a representation of what Texas food is, not style of cooking, but food.
Foodways, like what's grown
that's
there.
That's what Emmer and Rye is. It's 90% local.
Very, very cool.
Which you don't find often.
Yeah, and the Green Michelin is one of the highest regarded acknowledgments of a sustainable restaurant, sustainability top of mind, and I'm glad you're proud of that, because it should be. Hard to get those, and Michelin I respect.
Yeah, they've only given out 30-something of those ever.
Yeah, it's definitely a high bar. Well, let's move to Kanji, because I think you're opening a restaurant that's highly personal, and you're doing a cuisine that I would imagine the Austin diner needed some education.
Yeah.
It was maybe not. It wasn't like bourbon-centric cocktails and large cuts of meat.
Yeah,
you were doing the food of your home, or I would say you can describe it, but like for me, it's like pan-Caribbean.
Yeah.
There's influences from all over, and again, please, listeners, go there. It is such a great hang. The music is wild. I mean, great soundtrack, fun vibe.
Right.
But like you could put it in like a white room and eat the food on its own, and it's like, holy shit, Tavel, like you're changing my opinion about a lot of things.
Yeah.
So talk about opening Kanji and what that meant, and like how did you build this menu? Because I know there's dishes on the menu that you opened with still, and they're popular.
Yeah.
And you're going to talk about the pepper pot, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kanji was birthed. Honestly, the idea was spun when I moved to Austin. And as when we go to a city, we try to find ourselves within the food system, right? So if whatever is your culture and your background, you look for that cuisine to see how well you're relating to this community. And when I looked for Caribbean restaurants. There was one food truck that came up, so there wasn't a Caribbean restaurant.
Wow.
And
That's shocking.
and that's, yes, for being a food city, right?
Yeah, and a huge university there. People from all over the world going. Yeah, wow.
Exactly. So the diversity in food, I felt like that was an area that was missing. So in my opinion, okay, I just recognize, because in business you recognize demands and you always pay attention to those things. You don't have to act on it right away, but you have to be aware and seek those things out. So I knew there was a demand. I said, okay, cool. So that was the first thing. But more personally, I was like, well, who's the next Caribbean person that's going to move here? And when they do the same exact thing I did, how are they going to feel? Right? And for me, being a restaurateur in the city, there was no way that I could sit back and let that be a thing. So I knew in my mind that there was some point we needed to do this. Now, again, I'm a pastry chef. So my first thought was never open up a savory restaurant. My first thought was an ice cream shop or a dessert bar. Like that was my first thought. But personally, I knew that there was a representation that needed to show up, because I am a man from the Caribbean, and I feel like that representation always have to be present as long as I'm in a space. So that was something that I had on the back burner. So we opened up Emmer, we opened up Henbit, we opened up Hestia, and then the pandemic happened. And during the pandemic, I won Food and Wine Best New Chef. So things are some attention is starting to brew. And I said to myself, and this was when, everything in the world is changing and people are focusing now on, diversity and space and things of that nature. And I said, well, I had this thing in the back of my mind that I knew there was a demand for. And this is my time to do something about it, because now we have this platform, and now we have enough successful restaurants that we can look into what this is. So I went back to my business partners, pulled up Pinterest, created a vision board, and we said, this is what I'm thinking. I presented it, menu, everything. My partners is like, man, it's great, but we got to figure out how to get. I said, it's okay. We're gonna go to Guyana. So we got everybody. My whole partner team is 5 of us, and we got on a plane and we went to Guyana. And we spent about 6 days, ate at every place, all of that. We came back and it was like, okay, cool. We like it.
You sold them.
We want to do it.
Yeah, love it.
So then we started the process. But the importance to me wasn't taking them to Guyana. It wasn't about the food necessarily. It was because we're all chefs, right? And we can always make something better. And we are going to also make it our way, in a sense, right? No matter if 10 people cook the same menu, it's still going to be different.
Yeah.
And so I knew that we were going to create something different. But what I really wanted us to get was the spirit of the Caribbean. What I wanted was for them to look those people in their eyes and see the proudness, the culture, the celebration, what joy really felt like, and how they were received when they got there, which was very important.
Very key.
Because I wanted the same exact feeling to be when you walk into Kanji, how you're received, and that's what we call hospitality. But I wanted to make sure that was a very, very important part of what Kanji represent, was how do we make people feel when they walk in? And the only word we can think of is welcome, right? I felt welcomed when I walk into this space. Like, it was curated, and it doesn't matter if I've never been to the Caribbean. It doesn't matter if I am living in the Caribbean at the moment. It doesn't matter. When you're here, we're all welcome.
Yeah, it's an amazing statement, and certainly firsthand, when you walk in, as I said, it's a vibe, it's a party,
Energy, all of that.
and in the east side of Austin, there's lots of partying. It's a beautiful city with lots of conviviality, so to speak, and more.
Yeah, and more.
Yeah,
and then
more.
And then after that, it was like, okay, let's get into the food.
Exactly.
Right? How do we make this? So I didn't want it to be a Guyanese restaurant. But the beauty of Guyana is that it is a melting pot of the Caribbean, right? So all these different cultures, the Portuguese, Chinese, African, Amerindians, everyone contributed to the fabric of what that food is. So being able to create a restaurant that represents the Caribbean as a whole. So we're talking about food from Puerto Rico all the way to mainland Guyana. So we got Trinidad, Jamaica, Haiti, all those countries, St. Vincent, all those countries in there. So I am not going to represent all of them on one menu. But what we're going to be able to do is, as we continue to curate the menu, we're going to take you on a journey throughout the Caribbean. So you're going to get dishes from all across the country, all across the continent, in a sense, that really represents what that is.
In lesser hands, it's maybe not successful. I mean, it's a huge scope to land, and of course, you've got opinions from, as you mentioned earlier, from all sorts of people who grew up in Puerto Rico and grew up in Haiti.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about taking on all the Caribbean, how do you narrow it down? And as a follow-up, we have to talk about your sweet potato.
Yeah.
Because you see sweet potato on the menu, okay, fine, great. It's remarkable. So take us through that dish. I love that dish.
Yeah. So just to answer both questions, what I narrow it down is every dish needs to tell a story. So, a dish, wherever it comes from, wherever the inspiration is, that is part of the narrative. And, so like for Guyana, making pepper pot, right, which is a national dish of that country, I had to do that in the most authentic way. So, we're going to bring casrip from Guyana. And casrip is essentially yucca juice that's reduced with sugar, cinnamon, some other spices. And then you add that, thickening it. Looks like molasses when it's done. And you add that to like sauce. You can add it to cakes, all different types of things. And it's this dark, rich. Jamaicans, they use browning. Mm-hmm. But Guyana, we use casrip, right? So we definitely had to do that dish. And with the sweet potato dish, that dish came from Trinidad. So they make this thing couscous in Trinidad. So the real foundation was, okay, cool, we're gonna take that, and then there's this Puerto Rican dish. I can't remember the name right now, but it translates into both. Essentially, it's a ripe plantain that is stuffed with like meats, and they slice it, they fry it, slice it down the middle. You stuff it with meats and beans and stuff. So we essentially took the inspiration from that, and we just roasted sweet potatoes. We made this like coconut couscous, spiced.
Oh my gosh.
Coconut couscous. We put that in the bottom. Then we did the beans, and then we did some passion fruit and some garlic and just kind of like sauteed, and then we put that in the set. Man, as soon as I tried that dish, you get the combination of like creaminess from the sweet potato, sugar from the sweet potato. Then you have like that acid from the passion fruit, and then the nutty flavor from the coconut couscous in the bottom. All that, like, texturally flavor. It's actually one of my favorite dishes.
And I have to just say, your cooking it's so technical. These are technically sound dishes, and I think these are savory courses that only a master pastry chef can figure out. And you see it in Brooks Headley's restaurant, Superiority Burger. A pastry chef made that menu, and it's like veggie burger, but it's not. It's like so many different components, and this leads to pepper pot. And talk about, as a pastry chef, how are you cooking your national dish? It feels like there are a lot of steps in that dish.
Yes.
That's why Kanji's food is so unique. in because I think a lot of Caribbean food you have in New York City, it's like mom and pop restaurants. And some of the food is a little bit, I would say, like rougher around the edges, perhaps. That the chef may not be as technically sound, and it's beautiful. There's like lots of soul in restaurants that are in Queens, as you mentioned before.
Yeah.
And I love those flavors. To bring it into a restaurant from a pastry chef lens, it's just like you don't find this food anywhere.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like, one, I'm blessed enough to have really talented chefs that work with me, right? And the interesting thing that makes our group special, which is Emerald Rye Hospitality, what makes ours special is that all of us have to agree on this thing before it moves forward. So doesn't matter who you are or how many accolades you have. When you make a dish for the group of chefs that we are tasting with, we all should agree on this. And because we're all coming from different perspectives. And what happens is also I'm able to get influence from, a chef that understands Japanese cooking, and they're like, hey, like, what about if we do this and bring this flavor out? And so I have an arsenal of talented people around me that when I make a dish, what I made is not the final product.
Yeah.
Right. So most of these dishes, like our jerk chicken, like I made the first one, and it's like, how do we make this better, guys? And then I get like 5 or 6 people that's like, okay, we can do this, we can do that. And then we're able to transform this thing. Just because like our jerk chicken, I made the jerk seasoning, everything from scratch. So all these fresh herbs and spices and peppers that we grind up. And I made it, we tasted it, and it's like, it's really good. But how do we take this to the next level? Well, one of our chefs was like, what about if we ferment it? I'm like, ferment it? I've never heard that before. It's like, yeah, let's ferment the jerk seasoning. And if we ferment it for about, we ferment ours for like 6 months. So now there's this beautiful blend of this flavor. Now it's more earthy. Now it's developed. All the peppers have expanded to its capacity, and it's just like, holy shit! Like you taste it side by side, and you're like, this is way more superior than the. And you would only know that if you taste it side by side. If I serve both of those products on different days, it's both
jerk
delicious.
Chicken the Island.
Right.
Shout out to Islands in Brooklyn. That jerk chicken is ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't know if they're doing the 6-month fermentation there. I'll take Islands jerk chicken any day.
Right. But the simple thing, right? Where someone can say something that changes the trajectory on what you expect or think or what you grow up with. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what makes Kanji special, I think. We're able to not only utilize, because the truth is you don't want to eat the food that your grandmother made or your mom made at home when you go to a restaurant. Although you think you want to eat that, that's not what you want. You want the elevated version of that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's always funny when people say, whoa, my mom makes it. And I think it's like, yeah, but would you want to come to a restaurant and pay for that?
Exactly.
Go to your mom's house. She'll make it for you.
The ultimate response. That is the response. The chefs listening to the show. That's the response. Tell me a little bit about Pepper Pot, though, because to me that was a real highlight. So Pepper Pot is the national dish of Guyana. It was really a combination of the Africans and the Amerindians that lived in the land, right? And the Amerindians had the idea and the method on how we were able to use castor. And, Africans gather, hunter, meats. So what it is this combination. Essentially, it's a meat stew. So you would use any game meat. In our restaurant, we use wild boar. One, it's an invasive species in Texas, but it's also very flavorful. And when you're able to get like good wild boar, it's special. Yeah.
So you're essentially seasoning the meat the day before. And then we sear it, and then we add the castor. As I mentioned before, what castor means to me more than anything else, it was like, this is an ingredient that comes directly from my country. And there's no way that I was going to make a version of it, right? As I said, we like making things ourselves.
Yeah.
But that was one thing I was like, I am not going to do that. And I remember tasting Kazrip probably when I was, what I can remember, I was like 7 years old. And it was one of those moments where you're like, wow, this thing is like sweet, but still a little bit spicy. And it has some like this notes of like bacon spices. So it was a flavor that I always, always, always remember. And as soon as you taste it one time, you can never forget it. And I was like, wow, like this is so good. I was 7 years old and my aunt owned a factory in Guyana. It's, I say own a factory, but it's really small time, right? Yeah. And her daughter makes Kazrip now. So I just reached out to her and I was like, hey, like, would you mind? She's like, absolutely. Then we had to figure out how do we ship it from Guyana to the restaurant and all
you
the
need
details.
a little bit more than a suitcase full for a restaurant.
You need a little bit more than that. So it was one of those things where that story was so important for me to tell through the food. Most people sitting there have no idea how deep and meaningful that is. Also, you only eat Kazrip during Christmas time, right? Because it's a meat stew and there's not a lot. You grow up poor, so you don't eat meat every day. And when you're having that much meat, it's something that is special.
Yeah.
So, we got that. We worked it out. We got that in. And I wanted that to be on the menu because, one, it reminded me of my childhood every time I see or taste that dish. And two, I wanted to tell the story of that country in the most beautiful way and through the food. And to me, that's why that dish is so important, that I would never take it off the menu, because it's me.
It's you. It's you, and you're using products directly from your home.
Yeah.
But of course, you're using products directly from your new home.
Yes.
The Wild Boar.
Absolutely.
And, I think like academically, that's a beautiful thing, but it has to be delicious.
Yes.
And of course, it's popular.
Yeah.
People are ordering it.
Yeah. It's one of our top selling dishes.
Tell me about the pastry side briefly about kanji, because I think literally you can go there and have dessert only.
Yeah.
And you're going to be happy. The Kazrip ice cream, as you said, the flavor profile of the syrup is so unique, and when you have it in an ice cream form, it just really, really hits in a cool way. You've got the black cake, which I love as well. Like, how do you, as a pastry chef, this was an important element of Kanji's menu.
Yes, yeah. I had to do justice to the dessert also. So, we have black cake on the menu. Black cake, not a dish stemming from Guyana. That is the dessert that is, it takes about a year to make because you have to ferment the fruit for an entire year. So you're fermenting your orange, your watermelon rind, sorrel. You're fermenting all of that in rum and red wine for an entire year. Then at the end of the year, you blend it, and then you essentially make a pound cake and you fold it into. Bake the cake, and then you soak it with more rum. So it is a lot of alcohol in there, but what that means is that it doesn't go bad, right? So I've had a 10-year-old cake before.
That's wild.
It's crazy, right?
Wild.
Because of the amount of rum and red wine and the fruit that are fermented in there. It's essentially something that you can put into your fridge, and what it does, it represents longevity. So you will eat that in the Caribbean at like weddings and birthdays, because it's very sentimental for folks. So I had to do that on the menu because it's always a celebration when you come into Kanji. It's a memorable moment. And also I wanted to create something that you can't find everywhere you go. So the dessert menu was really curated to utilizing true, real dishes from the Caribbean. We got tres leches on there. Yeah. We had to do a rum punch because you can't go nowhere in the Caribbean without having rum punch. So I got a sorbet. But what we did is we do 3 different flavor sorbet, and then we pour a shot of Demerara rum over the top.
Yeah.
So you can't go wrong. El Dorado, sorry.
Yeah.
So you can't go wrong with that, right?
It's such a fun time. I'm going to have you back, and we're going to talk about San Antonio
Yeah.
and your tasting menu there. You do
Yeah,
tasting
yeah.
dessert bar. I've always wanted to have a dessert bar like that in New York. We don't have one. Leads to my question, Tavel. New York City expansion. Do you touch it? Do you go there?
There is a possibility. I think for where we are right now. So we just opened a Pullman Market there in San Antonio, and now we're up to 12 restaurants. For us, it's now based on the deal, on what is the offer.
Right.
So
I love this.
Yeah, if there's now we're in a space because the passion projects have worked its way out now.
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, let's just settle here. We have a few projects that we're really excited about, and we would want to expand those projects, right? So depending on how the deal is, that's where we'll just leave it there for now.
We'll leave it there for now. Let's get listen, developers listen to the show. Let's get the deal. Let's get the deal done. Would love to have your food in New York a little more frequently than my time in Austin. On This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. Are you ready?
Oh man, sounds amazing. All right, let's go.
The best fruit.
Best fruit, soursop.
Yeah. What's the flavor profile?
It is a combination between mango and pineapple. To best describe this, it's juicy. It has so much acid, so much antioxidants. It's good for your body. It's like one of my favorite, hands down, fruit ever.
The worst vegetable.
Ooh, I don't think I've ever run into the worst vegetable. Before. I don't know if I've ever ran into a vegetable.
You got to have one. There's got to be
one vegetable that I will not, okay, let's say a vegetable that I don't really care for.
Sure. You're polite.
Politely, radishes.
Yeah.
I can do without it.
Fair. Do you have a typical breakfast plan? Like, what are you doing for breakfast?
I don't eat breakfast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a breakfast guy. If I'm going to eat breakfast, it'll probably be some self-scrambled eggs with caviar. I know it sounds fancy, but I only eat it once in a while. That's how often I eat
You're
breakfast.
not a breakfast guy. This is
Not
why
a
I asked the
breakfast.
question. I wanted to get if you're a breakfast guy or not. Your favorite city outside America to visit for food?
Italy.
Favorite city?
Florence.
What's the dish?
Amazing food. Restaurant called Zaza. The dish that I had there, they're a combination between Indian and Italian.
Ooh, beautiful.
The dish that I had there that was very memorable, I would say. They did this like gnocchi, but it was like in this like beautiful coconut curry sauce. I dream about that dish to this day.
A restaurant you wish you could bring back from the dead?
Oof. Restaurant that I can bring back from the dead. This restaurant in Austin, it was called Texas French Bread. They closed. That was a restaurant that, they had some amazing pastas there that I really liked. Yeah, their bread program was great.
Really good. Your favorite cookbook of all time?
Favorite cookbook of all time has to be, well, I got two. What's Cooking in Guyana was the first book that inspired me as a chef. And Professional Bacon was the first bacon book that I've ever picked up when I went to school.
Yeah.
And they both, it really like transformed the way I view the world.
Wow. Last one, your favorite sandwich?
Oof. Favorite sandwich. I'm not a big sandwich guy. But what I will say is I've had a egg sandwich where it was egg salad, fried egg, salsa matcha between two breads.
This idea is genius.
They're so good.
You got the fried, you got the scramble, you got the salsa matcha.
Absolutely.
Is this like at a Mexican spot?
I can't even remember where I got that sandwich from.
Yeah.
But I remember eating it, and I think I got that sandwich somewhere in Wisconsin. It was like a
Wow.
spot that you walked in. And actually, I made that shit up. Now I'm thinking about it.
I love
They were doing the egg sandwich, just a regular egg sandwich.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, can you fry an egg and put on that for me?
Oh.
And the dude was like, yeah, I can do it. And then there was salsa matcha, and I just put some salsa matcha on it. And it was the favorite sandwich I've ever
You
had.
invented it. Your favorite.
That was it. It sounds braggy, man.
Nah, it's
See,
not.
we go listen to this show and be like, this dude is.
Nah, it's exactly. Your memory was that it was from a restaurant, but it was actually your brain.
Yeah.
Tavel, Bristol-Joseph, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Matt. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Hey, Liza, what is up? How are you?
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
I'm great because we are in spring cookbook season right now.
Yeah, the weather is not spring, but
No.
the bookshelf is spring.
Yes, the spring colors are blooming on my shelf. And we're here to talk about some of our, I would say, some of the books that we're looking forward to being released this spring. You know, we haven't read every single one of these. We've checked out the PDFs, but these are titles that we just want to talk about. We're excited.
Yeah, I think it's such a good season for cookbooks, and there are even more than the ones we're going to talk through today, and certainly a lot of authors that we'll have on the show as well. But these are some of the ones that we're jumping off the page, at least.
Absolutely. And we will come back with another couple spring previews on the show. We have some surprise guests talking about their lists, and we also just will have our own in 3 things and just popping in from time to time. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start.
Yeah.
Okay, the first book that I'm excited about is called In the Cucina. It's by Woldy Reyes, who is a Filipino, plant-based mostly cook here in New York. Woldy is a buddy of mine through the food scene here. He does a lot of catering for events, and I think he's really known for this beautiful, vibrant, contemporary Filipino style. And his book I'm really excited about because he's kind of encapsulating his family history, the family recipes that he's adapted to be plant-based in some cases, and everything looks really good. I want to make this kabocha squash lumpia.
Ooh, yeah.
Also his bibingka cake, which is a very bouncy, squishy cake he's kind of known for here in New York. He's even done it for a cake scene event before, which I was really pleased with. And he has a couple of bibingka recipes. So I think those will be some of the first things.
I love it. Well, I'll jump in next. And my first book is Pakistan by Maryam Jalani. Maryam is somebody I've known for a long time. She was actually a cook in residence at Taste 6 years ago. And I've had the pleasure of working with her. And this book, to me, is extremely my kind of book. It's very, very editorial. She grew up in Islamabad, Pakistan, and has traveled throughout the country. She's also lived throughout the world and has a really cool point of view on this complex food identity. And, just reading through the incredible prose here, the introduction and many of the chapter openers, I learned a lot. And, she lived in Pakistan that was certainly affected by partition. That is a very complex and hard topic to write about. I would say Miriam's real talent is just the full editorial package. It's the writing, it's the recipe development, and the editorial photography. It's gorgeous, this book. I'm so thrilled for her, and I can't wait to talk to her on the show about it.
Yeah, I think that'll be such a fun episode.
Yeah.
The next book that I'll call out is called Fat and Flour by Nicole Rucker, who is one of my favorite bakers probably ever. She has a bakery in LA called Fat and Flour, which I love going to whenever I'm back in LA. And I also really loved her first book, which is called Dappled, which is all fruit baking recipes, which is definitely my kind of book. And I think this one is just a really expert way into baking and pastry. She has a lot of techniques that I've never seen before, this kind of cold butter technique. And a lot of the recipes just sound so good, like a white chocolate banana cream pie.
Mm-hmm.
I love banana cream pie.
And hers are great.
Yeah, her pies, she's known for her pies specifically. She had a specific pie bakery in Grand Central Market before Fat and Flour. And then also some of the recipes are just this really expansive look into technique and variation. There's 6 kinds of chocolate chip cookies. There's 5 kinds of brownies. There's 6 kinds of banana bread. So I think if you are looking for that kind of like expansive baking book, this is maybe the one.
I can't wait to see the book. I haven't checked it out yet, but Nicole is a friend and has been on the show in the past, and I've always enjoyed her cooking. She had a restaurant that was a non-bakery that I liked, and then she has Fat and Flour, of course. What a singular voice in pastry. Love that one.
What's your next one?
My next one is from Rick Martinez. He is back.
Ugh, I'm so happy Rick is back with another book.
Yeah, he's such a thoughtful guy, and Mi Cocina, his first book was just a breakout hit, and we know Rick from his days at BA. I believe you worked with him and know him from your time there.
Yeah, when I started at Bon Appetit, Rick was there, and I was always like the most excited when his recipes would go up for tasting in the test kitchen.
He's really such a talented recipe developer. So this book is called Salsa Daddy. I mean, for real, that's such a great title.
It's perfect.
Perfect title. I have to call out the team. It's Alex Beggs and Alex Lau working on this book. 2 people I have such respect for. Alex Beggs is a prolific collaborator and writer, and of course Alex Lau is a talented photographer. And it all comes together in this magnum opus about the world of salsa. And I mean, for me, I love salsa. I've been eating it since I was 8 years old, cracking that jar in the Midwest, and that's how I knew salsa. Moving to New York, I learned a great deal. You grew up in LA, you have your salsa opinions, I'm sure. And I love the way these recipes develop. And I mean, he's got a salsa, a sweet and sour plum with jammy tart plums and Fresno chilies and garlic. He's got a Yucatan salsa with tomato and habanero and sour orange. I think he's kind of expanding the salsa universe. You don't know salsa until you've tried Rick's salsas is kind of the point of view here. And I love that he's got, he breaks from the salsa recipes and has a whole section about frying chips and plantains. He does a whole section on salsa matcha, and he does a peanut salsa matcha, which is quite the project recipe, but he makes it very, very clear on how you're doing it. He's just such a talented recipe developer. And then at the end, he has some recipes. So it's not just about making the salsas, it's cooking with it. And he's got tortas, tacos, and quesadillas, and one dessert. And I think you're doing the interview with him for the show, and I'd love to hear about. He has one dessert recipe. That's a little teaser. It's pretty amazing. The book is Salsa Daddy by Rick Martinez. I love it. So good.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to Rick about it. I think the point of view that you can make a salsa and have that in your fridge and have it be the jumping off point for whatever else you want to cook is really smart and just something that's really appealing to me.
Yeah.
Okay, the next book I want to talk about is By Heart by Haley Catalano, who's one of my favorite food developers, content creators to follow online. I think a lot of people know Haley and Chuck, her partner, who they live together, and they both are doing amazing videos. I loved chatting with them both in the studio, I think a couple years ago at this point. But I think it's really exciting to see a debut book from Haley. She just does the kind of food that I want to eat always, and a lot of recipes that I've seen her do on Instagram, or maybe she has a version of on her website. She's kind of expanding on and rounding out and having in this book. Her big beach sandwiches that I always that's my favorite kind of video to watch, is her making these beautiful, elaborate sandwiches and then packing them up and bringing them to the beach. She has one with brie and butter with shallots and frisee. That sounds really good to me.
Yeah.
She has a figgy tapioca pudding that I really want to eat. It's just the kind of soothing, comforting, delicious seasonal food that really makes me feel yes, I actually should add another cookbook to my collection.
I love Haley's point of view, and I just think when I mention Haley in passing in our building at Penguin Random House, or just friends in food media, everyone's literally she is my favorite, because I just think the way that these videos unfold, there's a lot of really smart cooking tricks there, but also she's got such creativity with the recipes.
Yeah, and she has a really strong restaurant background, and I think that's apparent from the way that she sprinkles salt in a video to the way that she's developing and writing these recipes.
Yeah. My next one is Sesame by Rachel Simons. Rachel is the founder and owner of Seed and Mill, which is a shop in Chelsea Market known for their tahini products, halva and tahini, and one of my favorite founders. I've had her on the show, and we have such a great time catching up. And Sesame is a book that there's a lot of desserts. There's a sesame and miso peach crumble and a bittersweet chocolate tahini tart. But then on the savory side, there's a great tahini granola recipe and some crunchy sumac chickpeas with tahini. tahini. And I just like the way she expands tahini in many different ways, creative ways in the food universe. So I think like Rachel's book has the best cover too. I have to say that. The cover is incredible. They got an illustrated cover. Judge's book by its cover, it's so good. That's Sesame by Rachel Simons.
The next book that I want to shout out is called Setting a Place for Us. It's by Hawa Hassan, who wrote In Bibi's Kitchen, which is such a special book that I love having in my collection. And I think this is one of the most ambitiously reported cookbook concepts I've ever seen before. It's a collection of essays and recipes, which is also how In Bibi's Kitchen was structured. And this is exploring the history of 8 countries that have been impacted by geopolitical conflict and talking about how that conflict has impacted cuisine and food systems. I think that this is a topic that I'm personally really interested in learning more about, and I really trust Hawa's reporting. And I know she spent years traveling to these countries, meeting with home cooks, talking about their stories, and tracing how that has impacted how they're cooking. I think it's just the kind of information that is hard to find really anywhere else. And also the recipes, I think, sound really special. For example, pupusas con curtido, which are like pupusas with that cabbage slaw from El Salvador, fava bean fritters from Egypt, ground peanut soup from Liberia. And I think getting to read the context behind all of these recipes is just the thing that will really set this book apart. So that's Setting a Place for Us.
What a great project. I loved In Bibi's Kitchen, and Hawa is such a terrific journalist and this important work. So I'm glad she's publishing it.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have her into the studio and have a much longer conversation just about this concept and how she brought this book to life, because I'm sure there are a lot of good stories there.
My next book is a fun one, Every Day with Babs, 101 family-friendly dinners for every day of the week. It's from Barbara Costello. We know her as Babs online. And I didn't know much about Babs until we agreed to do an event together. We will be appearing live at Rizzoli in New York City on April 8th, and I'll have a great conversation with her there. Tickets are on sale now. Check it out. But she is, in her words, a home cook, mother of 4, grandmother of 8, and the adopted grandmother of 2 million viewers. I think that's really funny. And I just like the way she is obviously... She's a grandmother. She's cooking for her grandchildren and hosting. And I mean, this is like pure Americana, warm hug bacon pasta, salsa verde fish tostadas, minivan pepperoni pizza chicken, and some desserts like her famous chocolate chip cookies. I just think Babs is really a lot of fun and has a lot of fans out there. And this book is, I think, a big crossover from creator to cookbook that is really working. And I loved paging through it in advance of our conversation. April 8th at Rizzoli, we're appearing.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. I am one of the 2 million who consider her to be adoptive grandma. And I think that it's really special to have that kind of generational wisdom that's being passed down and kind of enshrined in a book as well. And I would imagine that in addition to the recipes, she has a lot of those kind of hosting, cleaning techniques too.
Oh, yeah. What's your last one?
My last one is called The Guma, and it's by Noor Murad, who you might know her name because she's been a part of the Ottolenghi Test Kitchen universe for a while. I really loved the last cookbook that she worked on with Ottolenghi that was called Extra Good.
Yeah.
And this is an intro to the food that she grew up with in Bahrain, which is not a country that I've had a lot of food from before. So I'm really excited to get to learn more about what the Bahrainian cuisine is like, and also just kind of Noor's point of view outside of the Ottolenghi Test Kitchen. Some of the recipes that I want to make are springtime fattoush, stuffed baby eggplant, or, she says aubergine because they're British.
They're British.
Slow-cooked fenugreek lamb with pickled chilies, pistachio cake with labna. I think especially as spring is approaching and there's all these really beautiful green, herb-heavy recipes, this book is kind of the way that I want to be cooking in a month or two from now.
I love that you mentioned Noor's book. I got to spend a little time with Noor and Yodam before. And speaking with Noor, there's like no sharper mind with recipe development and being a leader in the Ottolenghi Test Kitchen. Really had Noor cooking across cuisines and cultures. So it's so cool to see Noor focus on the foods of Bahrain and tell her own personal story, stepping out from the Ottolenghi shadow and having her own moment. But I just know without having seen this book that the recipes are going to work just because of the rigor that she puts into her previous cookbooks. And I really love catching up with her. I hope to have her into the studio to hear all about this book. My last one is The Choi of Cooking. It is the next book from Roy Choi. Roy is an icon. He's the founder of Kogi in Los Angeles and has appeared on many culinary shows and Netflix shows, and he's just around our world. And I've gotten to know Roy over the years as somebody who, comes from a really, really, really strong fine dining background, and then ended up opening up Kogi and just changing the way, we thought about Korean food in America with the Korean kimchi taco. But this book is he's lightening things up. He's really focusing on eating healthy, and trying to take a little bit of a spin through some of these fusiony Korean American dishes like kimchi, Philly cheesesteak, and he's got a cold bibimbap noodles salad. Just looking at the package, having the book in advance, it's really visually extremely fun. Lots of sidebars, lots of voice in there, and I think Roy writes terrific books, and I'm happy he's putting one out this spring. Well, Liza, it's been really fun catching up about spring cookbooks. I can't wait to make many of these recipes. Have some of the authors on the show?
Yeah, me too.
This is Taste is hosted and produced by Eliza Barbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumbert and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.